Happy New Year. It's actually the 4th of January. 2025 was actually a pretty interesting reading year for me. I read my first adult fantasy book this year. I read my first romantasy book this year. I read a book that has been on my list since I was a kid. So, a lot of big milestones. One of the books I read this year took me, I think, about 4 or 5 months to finish, which sort of affected the rest of my reading year. But I think it was still a very successful year. I only have 16 things that I've read here this year, which is not as many as a good amount of people on the internet. You see videos of people reading 200 books. I just don't know how a person finds the time to do all that. But you know what? I think that there's a good amount of quality in this list, and I found some new favorites. So the way I usually do these year-end wrap-up videos is I start with my least favorite book of the year and then work my way up to my favorite book of the year. So without further ado, let's get into my least favorite book that I read in 2025. Red Light Winter by Adam Rapp. It's a play about two friends who are taking a vacation in the Netherlands. One of them is a down-on-his-luck writer, and the other one is this kind of alpha macho guy who is trying to lift his friend's spirits by getting them a prostitute. What follows is a love triangle between these three characters and an attempt to peel back their layers and expose the sources of their loneliness. I thought this play was okay. I think it lives in the shadow of other better plays, especially stuff like This Is Our Youth. I think for it to really have worked, it would have needed much stronger exploration of the characters, fewer pretentious rants, and more convincing dialogue to really stand out amongst the pack of other similar contemporary plays. The main character in this play was so self-righteous and whiny that he was kind of repulsive, but it felt like he was also supposed to be the surrogate for the playwright. And so just that combination of things was a bit of a turnoff for me. And the other characters, especially the female character, the prostitute, was so underwritten. You kind of come away from the play feeling a little bit like, what was the point of that? There's some funny moments here and there, but yeah, just not one that I really find to be memorable, and I think it could have used some more time in the oven. Boy's Life is a play made up of vignettes between several romantic or wannabe romantic relationships between men and women. It reveals how the values we tend to associate with masculinity and manhood are really just traits that children have, which is why it's called Boy's Life. It's not called Man's Life. But yeah, the womanizing, selfishness, manipulation, domination, those are all tactics of avoiding responsibility and of growing up. The characters in this play weren't really all that special. I kind of have similar problems with this play that I did to the last play, and I feel that you've seen this type of play done better as well. And I wish we saw the core of what these toxic masculinity traits, where they come from, like what's at the core of these mentalities, and like why they're so effective and they seem to repeat themselves throughout history. But the play never really goes that far into its theme. There's one really hilarious scene, but I think that the play could have used a bit more of that. It could have had some more original feeling dialogue. And overall, I wasn't blown away by it. I wasn't moved to tears by it. Did a decent enough job exploring what it set out to explore, but I don't feel that it's a play that I'll be remembering for even another year, which is unfortunate. But anyway, that's Boy's Life. Maybe it was that Cyrus had done the wrong drugs in the right order, or the right drugs in the wrong order, but when God finally spoke back to him after 27 years of silence, what Cyrus wanted more than anything else was a do-over, clarification. Lying on his mattress that smelled like piss and Febreze, in his bedroom that smelled like piss and Febreze, Cyrus stared up at the room's single light bulb, willing it to blink again, willing God to confirm that the bulb's flicker had been a divine action and not just the old apartment's trashy wiring. So definitely a controversial placement on this list, but we have Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I never do. But I really wanted it to be good. I really thought that I was going to enjoy this. In fact, I picked up this book at a Barnes & Noble. I'd seen some people, like some friends of mine had read this and liked it. And so I read the first chapter and I thought, this is going to be amazing. Like that opening that I just read. It's so good. However, the rest of the book doesn't live up to, in my opinion, the premise or any of the ideas that it goes for. And I'll get into why that is right now. I think the opening of this book, it's about a 27-year-old guy lying in his bed looking at a light bulb and asking God to make it flicker to kind of prove he's real. And that opening is just, it tells us everything we need to know about the character, about where he is in his life. He's aimless, he's directionless, but he's seeking direction. It tells you all of these things without him having to say anything. And the rest of the book doesn't follow that. Instead, we get the most talking ever. The character goes on these kind of pretentious diatribes about life, death, morality, and martyrdom. And it was hard for me to tell if the pretension of the main character was intentionally pretentious or if it was just the author. When I chose to believe that it was intentional, that the character is supposed to be pretentious, then I was like, okay, I can enjoy this a bit more. But something tells me that's not the case. And I think it's because the other characters in this book sound exactly the same as the protagonist, regardless of their background, regardless of their even, characters that are original to this novel. So there are these scenes where we have characters in the book interacting with characters from popular culture. So there's a character who's talking to Lisa Simpson, which is so fun and so awesome. I was excited to see that, and I was excited to see how many more there would be, how they would develop. And unfortunately, Lisa Simpson in this book doesn't sound anything like Lisa Simpson. She just sounds like the main character of this book, who occasionally says some Simpsons references. So that was really disappointing. And it doesn't just go for that character. It goes for all of the characters. They all sound like the guy. I was into many of the ideas of this book. I've definitely had many of these same thoughts, and I thought that it had some tenderness to it, especially as it goes on. There's some really genuine moments of self-reflection in there. And I found myself bookmarking some parts of the book that were particularly well written. I wouldn't go as far as to say the book is profound. It communicated some relatable ideas in poetic ways. Its flaws have only grown in my memory, and the things that I liked about it, I've forgotten about, which is unfortunate. I admire the ambition of this book, but I think it missed the mark for me, ultimately. So anyway, that's Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Let me know if you like this book, what you think about it, and what you disagree with me on. In the translator Jonathan Franzen's introduction, he makes some pretty harsh judgments about the musical adaptation of Frank Wedekin's 1891 play Spring Awakening. Some of those criticisms I agree with, many I don't, but it's interesting to view how this play has aged and whether the attempts to update it for the musical ended up blurring its message. It could have been the formatting or the reading pace, but there were scenes in this play that felt so cold, and they kind of took away any emotional impact for me. It felt detached and cynical at times, which I didn't expect, especially when considering the serious nature of the subject matter. It talks about sex, maturity, masturbation, self-harm, and suicide. Pretty heavy topics, and it has this very detached style to it, which I don't feel that the musical has. I feel like the musical is a bit more tender with its characters, whereas this one views them a bit more objectively, almost from God's perspective. And it probably has the most egregious Deus Ex Machina I've ever seen in anything ever. I don't think that kind of thing would fly. I think they planned to do something similar in the musical, and they took it out, which is good. However, it was really interesting to read a play that was produced in 1891 that tackles these themes that have continuing relevancy. There's really no stone left unturned here, and it was certainly not a welcomed piece of art in Germany at the time, and it still is controversial and remains to be controversial in 2025. Just a really forward-thinking play that tries to tell the story of young people and growing up and the harsh reality of all of that, the prison of shame that can lead to so many other tragedies. I'd be curious to read a different translation. I have mixed feelings about it, but ultimately I thought it was pretty good. There should have been a dark whisper in the wind, or maybe a deep chill in the bone, something. An ethereal song only Elizabeth or I could hear, a tightness in the air, some textbook premonition. There are misfortunes we almost expect in life, what happened to my parents, for example. And then there are other dark moments, moments of sudden violence that alter everything. There is my life before the tragedy, there is my life now. The two have painfully little in common. Tell No One by Harlan Coben is a really, really fun book with all of the secrets, the cheese, and bravado of a B action movie. It served as a really well-needed break from the more difficult and high-reaching stuff that I was reading in the year. Is the narrator way too concerned coming off cliche, making his deflections from cliche ironically more cliche? Yes. Is the narrator so focused on sounding macho and anti-sap that he sounds even more wimpy and like an edgy teen that's threatening that he hasn't yet reached his final form? Yes. Are the amount of twists and double twists towards the back end of this book so overwhelming and convoluted that they almost feel like a parody of a suspense book? Yes, but I had a really good, easy, fun time with this. I wasn't always on the edge of my seat, but the writing had some solid ooh moments, and the over-the-top nature of the story was really charming. I want to read one or two of these sections of the book that I thought were kind of funny. Funny because a little dated. Our main character is in a sort of disguise. The black baseball cap, it had some logo on it I didn't recognize, already had the bill broken in for me. Tyrese also gave me a pair of the same up-your sunglasses Brutus favored. Tyrese almost laughed when I came out of the bathroom. "You look good, Doc." "I think the word you're looking for is fat." He chuckled and shook his head. "White people." I caught my reflection in a building window and couldn't help but notice that I looked utterly ridiculous in my borrowed garb. Gangsta prep. Yo. Word. It's just, I mean, I can't defend that, but I smiled when I read it, so I enjoyed my time. I was 9 the first time the physicians came to the house. My uncle and his men were away. My cousin... Oh, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Ione. Okay, we're gonna go with that. My cousin Ione and her brothers played loudly in the kitchen, and my aunt did not hear the pounding at the door until the first man in white robes was already in the parlor. She did not have time to hide me. I was asleep, resting like a cat in the window. When she shook me awake, her voice was thick with fear. "Go to the woods," she whispered, unlatching the window and gently pushing me through the casement to the ground below. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I ended up having a lot to say about this book because after finishing it, I had no idea what to say about it. I didn't know whether I liked it or not. I didn't hate it, but I just had nothing to say about it. So I really tried to interrogate my feelings on this, and I ended up having a lot to say after all. So buckle up. I'm probably going to just read this straight up off my phone. So it's easy to say this is not a book for me, but why? For starters, the world building felt shallow and lacked detail. Couldn't tell how the magic influenced the kingdom outside of some select few people, and I would have liked more insight to feel completely immersed in that universe. Completely sauceless characters, particularly the protagonist and her golden retriever love interest. The romance had no tension, and any tension it tried to instill was superficial. He never does anything even slightly controversial or interesting. He's just the best, most perfect guy. And the plot contrivances that force them into like confessing their love and attraction for each other had my pupils running laps around my skull. That's what I wrote on my phone. Okay, a lot of the characters, pretty much every character uses the word trees as an expletive. They'll be like, "Oh, trees." And it's so stupid. It's so stupid. Every time I heard it, I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Also, all of the characters' names have tree names. The main love interest name is Raven Yew. Y-E-W. Raven Yew. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Okay, I'm getting way off track here. What is this book about? There is a creature called the Nightmare that lives inside of our main character's head. It's this secret that she has to harbor her entire life. She has this monster living inside her head. But it's not really clear what this monster desires, like what it cares about. There are some times where it's like helping her. There are times where it's making fun of her. There's times where it seems like it wants her to fail. It just seems like Rachel Gillig wrote the monster to be whatever it needed to be for the convenience of the plot. So I just don't care about it. It's every time the monster says anything, I'm just like, okay. There are also these little card rhymes that start every chapter that kind of set up a rule that the magic has in this universe. Some of them were fine. Some of them were the worst thing I've ever read. That's a little too much. Some of them were fine, but most of all, they were just kind of inconsistent. Like, the rhyme scheme and the meter would change between different card introductions, and it kind of went into this whole, the world kind of feeling inconsistent and messy. Okay, so what did I like about the book? Well, it was readable. I don't even mean that to be a sarcastic backhand at the book. I thought it was readable. And despite my faults with it, I wasn't dreading picking it up or anything to read a few chapters every day. You know, granted, I wasn't white-knuckling the book either and like on the edge of my seat, but I was just fairly neutral. And there were some decent twists that I hadn't expected. The end was kind of bold. The prose was decent. The plotting was pretty clear and direct. It was a fairly neatly constructed book, I thought. I can understand why someone would like it. I have a hard time understanding why it would be someone's favorite book or favorite series of books. I feel like, I'm not familiar with the romantasy genre at all, but I feel like with the amount of books in this genre, there are probably books that are a bit more bold. Just something with a little more sauce is all I can really ask for. And it might be that this book is above average in the genre. Its Goodreads rating is really high. I've seen it on other people's book lists. You know, people seem to really enjoy this book. It's part of a duology, and we'll see if I end up reading the second one. Yeah, so it's possible that this book is a cut above the genre. I personally can only say that I found it to be mediocre in the context of the literature that I'm accustomed to. And maybe it's a terrible comparison. Maybe my review of this book has no value because I'm not a fan of this genre. But all that being said, I've had more fun reading, but I've also had less fun reading. So, you know, maybe there's something to say for that. Blue pencils, blue noses, blue movies, laws, blue legs and stockings, the language of birds, bees, and flowers as sung by longshoremen, that lead-like look the skin has when affected by cold, contusion, sickness, fear, the rotten rum or gin they call blue ruin, and the blue devils of its delirium, Russian cats and oysters, a withheld or imprisoned breath, the blue they say that diamonds have, deep holes in the ocean and the blazers which English athletes earn that gentlemen may wear, afflictions of the spirit, dumps, mopes, Mondays, all that's dismal. The sentence goes on like that for like a page and a half, but that is On Being Blue by William H. Gass. Kind of a retrospectively celebrated writer. Definitely was awarded in his heyday, but I feel like I see him more now. He wrote this book called The Tunnel, which I have yet to read, but I'm planning on reading this year. And he wrote this book called Omen Setter's Luck, which I read last year, and it placed pretty high on my list last year. This is a philosophical inquiry into the color blue. In my Goodreads review of this book, I wrote, acclaimed sentence crafter brags about his favorite color. That's pretty much what this book is. The book is an exploration of the color blue in literature and other forms of art. It discusses the diversity of blue across emotional and symbolic representation, and ends up being a beautiful celebration of the color blue. And you get these classic Gass passages, full-on pages that stand above your average literary analysis. Huge passages that you just read over and over and over again because they're so rich and thoughtfully considered. Yeah, Gass is an incredible writer. I definitely need to read The Tunnel, but this is a good primer for his use of language. His access to his vocabulary is stunning. His writing is just very mellifluous. That's a pretty good word, okay? It has this beautiful flow to it. I don't think this is an essay that everybody needs to read. It's relatively short. It's like 100 pages. Early on a Sunday, after first mass in Clonagall, my father, instead of taking me home, drives deep into Wexford towards the coast where my mother's people came from. It is a hot day, bright with patches of shade and greenish sudden light along the road. Foster by Claire Keegan. Maybe another controversial placement, kind of low on this list, but this is like the midpoint of the list, and I thought it was a really good book. It's very simple, very straightforward. It is tiny. I mean, I think it's like 90 pages, and the pages look like this. They're very small, and you probably can't really tell, but the font size is really big. So I read this incredibly quickly. It's about a young girl who briefly moves in with a new family, and this family shows her love and affection that she never experienced in her immediate family. It's a sweet and touching little story. I wish the narrative voice of the little girl was a bit more personal or experiential. Most of the time when you're reading, you get her observations, but you don't really get a sense of the emotional impact. Not in a way that feels personal. You know, you'll get that sometimes she says that she cries, but like if someone tells you they cry, it doesn't really do anything for, at least for me. You know, I want to like get into that person's perspective. Also, it made me confused of why this book was written in the first person. We also don't really get a sense of her personality. I get why people like it. I do think it was really good, but I'm left a bit puzzled on what makes this a masterpiece like people claim it to be. It's a really good short book. I recommend it to everybody, but it didn't blow me away. I'll just put it that way. I feel like I'm being really more negative than I'm trying to be. It's a good book. You should read it. It began the usual way in the bathroom of the Lassimo Hotel. Sasha was adjusting her yellow eyeshadow in the mirror when she noticed a bag on the floor beside the sink that must have belonged to the woman whose peeing she could faintly hear through the vault-like door of a toilet stall. Inside the rim of the bag, barely visible, was a wallet made of pale green leather. It was easy for Sasha to recognize, looking back, that the peeing woman's blind trust had provoked her. We live in a city where people will steal the hair off your head if you give them half a chance, but you leave your stuff lying in plain sight and expect it to be waiting for you when you come back? It made her want to teach the woman a lesson. A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. This book won the Pulitzer Prize. It is a series of vignettes starting from this friend group who is involved in a punk rock scene. You'll be reading one chapter about one person, and then the next chapter will be about a minor character in the previous chapter. And it kind of jumps around like that until it ultimately becomes a multi-generational novel. And this book was a roller coaster for me. Some chapters, like that first one that I just read a part of, were really good. And then some of them I was just sort of bored by or not as into. It almost reads like short stories, and each chapter is written in a different style. I think it's fair to say that the book is a little gimmicky. There's even a chapter towards the end that's written as a slideshow presentation, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, it's admittedly a little gimmicky. But it did win me over in the end. My Goodreads review said, a novel that inhabits all of the beauty and splendor and melancholy and longing and pain of a sunset, the dread of something beautiful ending and the joy of something beautiful beginning. Yeah, and that's the main takeaway I had from the book. It was nostalgic without me being nostalgic about any of the particulars of the narrative, or to put it in a gooey way. By the end, I felt the author's heart, and it was surprising and special. It's not a book for everyone, but it's a book I have complex feelings about that I'd consider revisiting in the future. Lee Chong's grocery, while not a model of neatness, was a miracle of supply. It was small and crowded, but within its single room, a man could find everything he needed or wanted to live and to be happy. Clothes, food, both fresh and canned, liquor, tobacco, fishing equipment, machinery, boats, cordage, caps, pork chops. You could buy at Lee Chong's a pair of slippers, a silk kimono, a quarter pint of whiskey, and a cigar. You could work out combinations to fit almost any mood. The one commodity Lee Chong did not keep could be had across the lot at Dora's. And you find out that Dora's is a whorehouse, basically. Yes, this is Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. In my Goodreads review, I wrote, life is one big party with all of its chaos and occasional bouts of violence, physical and mental, and with all of its communal radiance, song, dance, drink, and urgency. Yeah, this book is really great. I mean, it's no surprise it's John Steinbeck, and he never disappoints. His books feel lived in, with vibrant but grounded characters, and an emotional tenderness pervading through the muscularity of it all. It's a really small-scale novel, so it's not as ambitious as, like, The Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden, which I actually haven't read East of Eden yet, but I'm going to this year. That's the plan anyway. So yeah, it's not as ambitious as his most acclaimed work, but it's no less the mark of a literary genius. He makes the small seem powerfully important and the vast seem intimate. I don't have much else to say about this book. I think that if you haven't read it, you should definitely read it. It's a pretty slim book, but like I said, it's just full of humanity. He's just one of the best. So, Cannery Row, John Steinbeck. For the heart, life is simple. It beats for as long as it can. Then it stops. Sooner or later, one day, this pounding action will cease of its own accord, and the blood will begin to run toward the body's lowest point, where it will collect in a small pool, visible from outside as a dark, soft patch on ever-whitening skin as the temperature sinks, the limbs stiffen, and the intestines drain. These changes in the first hours occur so slowly and take place with such inexorability that there is something almost ritualistic about them, as though life capitulates according to specific rules, a kind of gentleman's agreement to which the representatives of death also adhere, inasmuch as they always wait until life has retreated before they launch their invasion of the new landscape, by which point, however, the invasion is irrevocable. This is the first volume of a series called My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard. He is a Norwegian author, and this is a part of a 6-volume series just about this guy's life. It feels, to me, like an adult version of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. There are scenes where he's trying to sneak alcohol to like a New Year's party, and the tension of like not wanting to be found out by his father and his uncle. What's most shocking about this book is its total lack of hesitation and its openness and its honesty. It was also such an addicting read, and it just had a great flow to it. It doesn't feel like he researches anything that he writes, and there's something kind of like admirable about that. He just goes on vibes, and I love that for him. This volume mostly centers around his relationship to his father and how that affects his life in different ways, sometimes more subtle, sometimes more obvious. And I wonder how that will play out in the rest of the volumes, if it'll take that same framing device. I'm at least going to read the next 2 books in this series, and, depending on how much I like those, I'll read the other 3. Hopefully they're just as good as this, if not better. It's an honest look at adolescence, relationships, and death that made me feel nostalgic and more connected to the people around me. They reached the canal along the track leading up from the river, their slingshots drawn for battle and their eyes squinting, almost stitched together in the midday glare. There were 5 of them, their ringleader the only one in swimming trunks, red shorts that blazed behind the parched crops of the cane fields, still low in early May. The rest of the troop trailed behind him in their underwear, all 4 caked in mud up to their shins, all 4 taking turns to carry the pail of small rocks they'd taken from the river that morning, all 4 scowling and fierce and so ready to give themselves up for the cause that not even the youngest, bringing up the rear, would have dared admit he was scared, the elastic of his slingshot pulled taut in his hands, the rock snug in the leather pad, primed to strike anything that got in his way at the very first sign of an ambush. That sentence goes on for several more lines, but this is Hurricane Season by Fernando Melchor, or Melchor, I don't really know how to pronounce it. This was originally written in Spanish by a Mexican author, translated by Sophie Hughes, who does an amazing job with this translation. It's insanely good. I had no idea that it was even translated until I got curious about it halfway through and looked for the translator's name. I could not believe that this was translated. It takes place in this kind of cursed village in Mexico. This book is bleak. There's a pariah in the village who's referred to as the witch. At the beginning of the book, you find out the witch has been murdered, and so the rest of the book uncovers what happened to the witch and what manner of evil and violence has been thriving in this village. Fernando Melchor's writing is downright torrential. Long winding sentences spiral deeper and deeper into the plunging darkness of their subjects. It's hard not to read each chapter in one feverish frenzy, and it's only when you've finished each chapter that you realize how nauseous you are. It's just really impressive writing. In terms of negatives, I found myself wanting a bit more variety in the townsfolk's voices from chapter to chapter. Understandably, most of them are bitter, they're angry, vengeful, depraved, but I wish the ways in which those feelings were expressed were more distinct across the board. Aside from some eyebrow-raising moments, I was totally engrossed in this story. It's bold, and something I probably wouldn't dare write myself, which seems significant in contemporary fiction. Not that I believe it to be morally questionable, but that the author is not afraid to repulse the reader, and the author did repulse this reader. You could argue that some of the methods that this author used to achieve this effect are cheap and kind of shock value-y, but by the end of each chapter, you understand the psychology of the subject and the yearning that has brought them this low. A really stark, not for the faint of heart, would not recommend this to everybody, but if you can stomach something a bit darker, I highly, highly recommend this book. Now in these days the Lord God had turned his face from the business of men, and the angels who had remained loyal to him said to one another, "We must look after the children of Adam," and they did so, as best they could. Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. I don't have a copy of this book, I borrowed it from a friend, but this was the most surprising book that I read all year. It's like a medieval Last of Us book that had me choked up at the end. I don't know, I just found everything about it to be surprising. It follows this disgraced knight, a disgraced priest, and an apparently special girl as they navigate an upcoming apocalypse after God has abandoned the earth. Lucifer and his demons have taken full advantage, casting a terrible plague and trying to kill the seed of Adam, which is humanity. The prose was really consistent and really beautiful. It felt like like a New Testament Bible. Is kind of the style that it apes at times, and I think it does a really good job of doing that. This is my first real adult fantasy book. It's a standalone book, and I'm worried that I'm spoiled now that I've read one of the best ones, at least contemporary ones in this genre, because it's just that good. It's so well considered, especially for I believe this is a self-published book. The characters were endearing if they were, a little flat, but the action scenes left me breathless. The demon designs were really creative too. There's one that's like a statue of Mary like holding a baby, and it knocks on people's doors and just kills them if they answer the door. It's insane. It's an insane book, but so creative. Yeah, this is a fantastic achievement. Totally lives up to the hype. I know this story structure about like gruff man taking optimistic girl through hell, essentially, is very played out at this point. You've got The Last of Us, you've got The Road, which is about a boy, but you get the idea. God of War is kind of like that. Yeah, there are parallels throughout literature and movies and video games recently, but I think this is a great version of that story, and I was moved. So yeah, I think it completely lives up to the hype. I know this book is hyped all over the internet, but coming from someone who never reads fantasy, I would recommend this to just about anyone. The sky broken by the bare oaks and elms of New Prospect was full of moist promise, a pair of frontal systems grayly colluding to deliver a white Christmas, when Russ Hildebrandt made his morning rounds among the homes of bedridden and senile parishioners in his Plymouth Fury wagon. A certain person, Mrs. Frances Cottrell, a member of the church, had volunteered to help him bring toys and canned goods to the community of God that afternoon, and though he knew that only as her pastor did he have a right to rejoice in her act of free will, he couldn't have asked for a better Christmas present than 4 hours alone with her. This is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. Jonathan Franzen is just that guy. I talked about him a bit ago because he did that translation for Spring Awakening, but I read his most popular book, The Corrections, last year, and that was my favorite book of last year. It's become one of my favorite books of all time. Go back and watch my Everything I Read in 2024 video to hear my full thoughts on that book. But this is his most recent book. It's a part of an apparent trilogy, a multi-generational trilogy. I think it spans 30 years. This one takes place in the 1970s and follows a pastor and his family, and the pastor starts to get a crush on one of his parishioners, even though he's married and has 4 children. And then it explores each child's psychology, what they're going through, and the wife as well. This book just solidifies him as one of my favorite authors. He has this way of delving into characters' psychology without feeling like the action comes to a screeching halt. Everything feels propulsive and urgent and fully realized. His character exploration is seriously second to none, and while he is cautious of cliche and sentimentality, he manages to pull out some really powerful emotion in all of his books. Well, in the 2 that I've read. This book, Crossroads, feels like a deliberate attempt to be more accessible than The Corrections. It seems like he's taken a step away from trying to be perceived as clever or trying to write the great American novel. It seems that he's just trying to write a great book, and he wrote a great book. The language is significantly toned down in comparison to The Corrections, and while I do miss the try-hard 10-cent word-filled sentences of The Corrections, it's impressive that he's able to write characters and situations in this new style with just as much depth and nuance. This is the book I would more confidently recommend to people, to the average reader, I would say. Unfortunately, I think the latter section of the book is a little bit more clunky. I think we could have used another 50 to 100 pages to really ease into some of the emotional and perspective changes in the book. Not to get too into the weeds here, but anyway, criticisms aside, this was such a regenerative read. His writing feels like home. His storytelling reminds me of just how much I love spending hours and hours reading a book. And I'm very excited to read the rest of this trilogy when it comes out. See the child. He is pale and thin. He wears a thin and ragged linen shirt. He stokes the scullery fire. Outside lie dark turned fields with rags of snow, and darker woods beyond that harbor yet a few last wolves. His folk are known for hewers of wood and drawers of water, but in truth his father has been a schoolmaster. He lies in drink, he quotes from poets whose names are now lost. The boy crouches by the fire and watches him. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I'm not sure what there is to say about this book that hasn't been said a million times before on and off the internet. The only book I had read before this by Cormac McCarthy was The Road, and while I enjoyed it, I felt that the writing style didn't particularly work for me. I felt that it lacked consistency. He would have these passages that were simplistic and minimalistic, almost like Hemingway-esque, and then he would go on these like linguistic acrobatics, and so it was a bit disjointed for me and hard to get into the writing style. So I was a little bit worried and apprehensive going into another book by him to see if I would even like this style. I'm so glad that I pushed my concern aside and picked this book up, because the writing style of this book is totally up my alley. It sounds like a New King James version of the Bible. The Americans might have traded for some of the meat, but they carried no tantamount goods, and the disposition to exchange was foreign to them. And so these parties divided upon that midnight plain, each passing back the way the other had come, pursuing, as all travelers must, inversions without end upon other man's journeys. Oh boy, he was cooking with that. It's crazy, some of the sentences this man pulls out. Someone asked the ex-priest if it were true that at one time there had been 2 moons in the sky, and the ex-priest eyed the false moon above them, and said that it may have well been so, but certainly the wise high God in his dismay at the proliferation of lunacy on this earth must have wetted a thumb and leaned down out of the abyss and pinched it hissing into extinction. And could he find some alter means by which the birds could mend their paths in the darkness, he might have done with this one too. Like, that's crazy stuff. Like, it's the kind of book that feels like it was inevitable to have been made. That even if Cormac McCarthy didn't get around to writing it, someone else is going to. And I can't really describe what that means exactly. It's just a feeling that I have, that it feels eternal in a way. Its themes feel eternal. The writing style feels classic, but also very fresh and moving, and it definitely speaks to today as well. Anyway, just a very beautiful, dark, gripping novel that I won't soon forget. An absolute favorite of mine now, and I am stoked to read more of Cormac McCarthy. Oh, my only major qualm with this book is that the kid character, who's the protagonist, he's out of the book for this whole middle section, and when he comes back, he has a bit of like a change of heart, or he has some kind of like internal journey that we never really get to see. As a result, it's kind of like, oh, I guess he has empathy now, but it's never really established. And I wish that we got to see more of that, because the way that his character ends up kind of came out of nowhere for me. Other than that, yeah, it's just a masterful book. It's a bleak story. It's violent, hopeless. It reflects the recurring history of war and violence that has plagued humanity since humanity's existed, and it will likely never die. I am seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies. My posture is consciously congruent to the shape of my hard chair. This is a cold room in university administration, wood-walled, Remington-hung, double-windowed against the November heat, insulated from administrative sounds by the reception area outside, at which Uncle Charles, Mr. DeLint, and I were lately received. I am in here. Infinite Jest, David Foster Wallace, yes. Oh man, I mean, it doesn't get more lit bro than this. This is the lit bro final boss. It lives up to all of the hype that it's received over the years since its publication in the 90s. I want to say 96. But anyway, I talked about this book at great length in the previous video that's on this channel. You'll know it when you see it. It's a review of Infinite Jest. But to summarize, this magnificent work of postmodern maximalist literature is as intelligent, thought-provoking, and grandiose as it is hilarious, compelling, and emotionally resonant. David Foster Wallace has this way of making you feel like you're in on the joke rather than leaving you stranded. He'll guide you through difficult passages only to gift you with something easy and really relatable. This book explores the source of our discontent, scrutinizing our value system, and implores us to be active and participate in our lives and not succumb to a life on the sidelines. It has become one of my favorite books ever. And while it's not perfect, it's even more endearing in its imperfection. I just find myself so connected to this book. It took me months to read this giant thing. Took up most of my reading time this year. But I wasn't finding myself feeling like, oh, I just have to finish this book. I just have to get on with it so I can read something else. I just took my time with it. I never rushed through it. I savored the experience of reading it, and I took pleasure in the thought that I only get to read this book for the first time once. And while that is true, it definitely won't be the last time that I read this. I think this is going to be a book that I return to multiple times throughout my life. I really resonate with the narrative voice of David Foster Wallace. I find it really funny and touching and honest and moving. This book has some really moving sections in it. It can be a little dark, and I do want to warn you about that. I mean, it gets unexpectedly dark and twisted at times. It's just a beautiful piece of work. Now, I haven't said anything about what this book is about, but just read it. Just read it. Mostly it takes place at a tennis academy and an addict's halfway house. Watch my video about it. Anyway, so that is my favorite book of 2025. Thank you so much for watching this video and sticking it through to the end. I'm very long-winded, and this took me longer to film than I thought, but I hope you got something out of it. Right now, I'm reading Ficciones by Borges, a collection of Borges short stories, and I just started The Instructions by Adam Levin, which is another big 1,000-page book, but it's really fun so far, and both books are really fun so far. Let me know what you're reading in 2026. Let me know what your favorite books of 2025 were, and look forward to some more videos on this channel. I didn't get to film as much as I would have liked to in the previous year because I was just busy, which is good. It's good to be busy, but I neglected filming on this channel last year, so I'm hoping to film some more stuff in 2026, and I have some good ideas for that.